afternoon and welcome to United TV. Today is June 14, 2024. My name is Kamal Erkan. Today we are actually having our session a little bit earlier because we have three different episodes on United TV. And our Speaker of the House, Valerie Longhurst, is going to join us. Recently, one of her bills that she sponsored, HB 350, which we discussed so many times in the last 3-4 sessions. Now this is live, and it was signed yesterday by Governor Carney. And we are going to get into the details of that and ask the speaker to explain some of the issues with the bill and what this bill brings and how it's going to impact the healthcare facilities and also how it's going to impact us and why this is important for us. So, Speaker Longhurst, you can join us now. All right. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Good. You know, you may remember this or you may not remember this, but you were my first political state official who was on the show. This is 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago almost. And thank you for being with us again.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think Donna Gunkel, we have a mutual friend that worked with you that our daughters went to school together, so we had that connection. So
absolutely. And then I have seen you in a couple different places in between. And I know you've been really busy, and you were getting a lot of heat for this HB 350, the bill that you sponsored. And I think one of the nice thing from your point, your perspective, is when something like this you sponsored, now it's become a law and it's signed by the governor. So this is a huge success for you. So, but this bill is a little bit different than any others because it got a lot of attention from the healthcare facilities like the hospitals. And believe it or not, I know you would believe me, but I put so much support out there publicly in this show and make sure that people understand why this is important. But I think it would be more important to hear directly from you. And timing of today's show was really nice because it was just signed yesterday. So now it's live. And tell us what this is going to do for Delawarians and also some of the things that I have some alterations with the hospitals and their, reaction to this, and then we can discuss all those.
Yeah, well, first of all, Kamal, thank you so much for having me on here. And I really, truly thank you and everybody else who supported this piece of legislation. It was a very big lift. This isn't usually my wheelhouse, the healthcare perspective. I'm usually in the mental health space, women's rights and environment. So I kind of stepped out of my element because I thought this was a very important issue to address. Senator Townsend and I came together with former Representative David Bentz. And, for 6 years, the governor had put out, if I could just talk about the genesis of this bill, is that the governor, when he came into office about, 6 years ago, 7 years ago, he set benchmarks for the healthcare industry. And those benchmarks, he expected them to hold to those benchmarks. And year after year, you have to excuse me, I'm catching a cold. Year after year, the hospitals never met those benchmarks, right? And when you give somebody the opportunity to say, hey, can you stay within these benchmarks so that our healthcare costs aren't rising as high as they were? He asked them to do that. We did not put legislation in. It was just through our DFAC to say, please meet these benchmarks. So year after year, they didn't meet those benchmarks. So as that starts piling up, and I could tell you probably about 10, 15 years ago in the Markell administration, we were talking about this, but it's a very heavy lift to, put a piece of legislation this through. So there's been some, we've tried to work on it over the years, and now we got to the breaking point that when we started the first fiscal year, this year's fiscal year, we've seen a 27% increase in just state employees' benefits. And as we started talking to businesses and all the healthcare rising throughout the state, and 46% of our state budget is on healthcare. And healthcare is important to our state. And when you look at where we rank throughout the United States, we are ranked like 27th in the state or 27th in the nation for healthcare. And some of those things, you put them together and you say, at what point do we take a stand as a legislature? We get elected to go into office to ensure that our constituents in the state is taken care of. And this is one of those issues that we just felt like we had to tackle it this year. We knew it was going to be a big mountain to climb. And again, I thank you and your organizations for, supporting us on this because you are aware of it. And when you dive into the costs of Delaware compared to other states, because we did initially take this model from Vermont. So if you look at like blood transfusions in Delaware, it's like $751, where Vermont is like $684. Blood chemicals, Delaware is 422. Vermont is $65. And you all know these numbers, how there's so much inflated. So the question is, why are they inflated? MRIs, brain scans in Delaware, it's like $4,361. In Vermont is $2,734. Now, some of the misconceptions that when we did this Vermont model, which was where we started, you needed to have some sort of model to follow. People were coming out saying, well, it's going to hurt the quality of healthcare because of Vermont, which actually the quality of healthcare has increased and more people are actually going and getting preventative healthcare and making sure that they're not waiting until something dramatic happens, that they're doing preventative measures. And then they were saying, the hospitals are going to go out of business. Well, that's not true, because none of the Vermont, they've had it for 30 years and they have not gone out of business. And so unfortunately, when you decide to tackle an issue of this magnitude, you have lobbyists in the world to counter what your beliefs are and where you think the direction of the state needs to go. And we got hit pretty hard on this. It was a pretty big hill to tackle. And but when you have lobbying out there that has lots of money, there was a lot of misinformation out there. So we had to try to get ahead of it. But I can tell you that with the governor behind this bill, the Senate behind it, the House behind it, we all knew the impact that it has on Delawareans. And we had to address it this year. And that's what we did. And we did start with the Vermont model, but we kind of melted in with a substitute bill with the Massachusetts model. We did try to bring everybody to the table. A lot of meetings, hours and hours. I could tell you, out of all the pieces of legislation that I've done, this is probably the biggest piece of, out of 20 years experience in the legislature, I could tell you this was probably the biggest lift. But transparency is really important and was key to this legislation. And I think, at the end of it, I think we've come to agree that we do need to have transparency. We need to know where these numbers are. We need to know, how do we fix it? Because we can't continue going down this road that healthcare costs are rising and, we can't address it. So that's kind of the genesis of where we were. And if you want me to dive into the bill a little bit, I can do that.
I just want to kind of maybe emphasize this issue with the transparency. So the nonprofit organizations like our hospitals in the state of Delaware, we are able to see those. Any citizen, any resident in Delaware can go online and then search for the Christiana or Bay Health or BB and their tax returns, where you can actually see how they are making their money, where they're spending their money, and whether or not they make profit or not. So I share this one in our social media channels because this is mind-blowing when you see 1,017,000,000 profit, net profit in 5 fiscal years from a non-profit hospital, and another 360 million in the same 5 fiscal year from a much smaller hospital. These are profits. These are not their revenues. These are profits. These numbers are real. And that's why this is so important. And the year in 2020, 2021, I believe that's the year where we had the Affordable Act and the COVID support from the government. I think, if I'm not mistaken, like Christian Hospital got 157 million, but they made 387 million. So they are just going after everything that's available out there, but yet public doesn't really understand these numbers. So this was one part of the transparency, which my goal, in order to support your bill, my goal was, because I was doing this for our business long time ago, when I started first making this Excel file, what you see on that third video, that was 2011, 2012, because we were working with Christian Hospital at that time, and we needed to know how they are making their money. So, but then when your bill came about, I'm like, hey, I just need to update what I had before, and that's what we did. Now, the other thing that's important here is they also list how they are spending their money, right? So, like when I see in 2 years at the executive level, someone is getting like 70% increase on their, $900,000 salary, and yet they were not there that entire year. That's something that, like, my organization is not a nonprofit, and I don't need to share this with everyone. But when you are a nonprofit, you benefit from the public resources, state and federal resources, and you are exempt for certain things. That's why you need to actually be putting these things out there, and these are available, and the transparency is important. And one other thing with the transparency is the board members. Like, I checked, CCH has board members. Two of the W.L. Gore directors are their board members. And you may notice or not, but W.L. Gore is one of the big medical supply company, and my surgery center actually buys things from them as well. So we were their customers, but then I got hit by one of their board members who is the director at WL. He probably didn't realize, or we were not that important for him. So he just like put some, not really well drafts or well crafted message on my post. And that I understand that this is misleading. So that's why this transparency is kind of like the key. And one thing that I want to ask you, with the expenditure benchmark and the Vermont model, we have this expenditure benchmarking, and this didn't work, right? It's not, because facilities are not coming out and giving you what we need, and they're not meeting those benchmark goals. So that's why this bill was needed. So that's kind of like some people, again, didn't understand. If we can now get into the specifics of the bill, what you are hoping to see from this, I think that would be.
Yeah, so let me go back to that one piece about they are a nonprofit, yet they are making a profit. And then what are they doing with that money? What we're seeing is that, they're going out of state and buying hospitals. So they're using the that extra money, and they're not reinvesting in the state of Delaware. We know that we have a doctor's crisis and that we have a workforce crisis. We know that we need to pay our nurses more, our doctors more, and to reinvest into your own hospital and ensuring that your doctors are not overworked. We just saw just recently that Christiana Care, that they want to unionize.
Yeah.
And they want to do that for what reason? Are they getting paid? Are their hours out of whack? I mean, are they overworking? So to see the money going out of state instead of being reinvested in the state was also another issue that really kind of put us over the edge. And we hear it every day, because we do honor our first responders, our nurses, and our doctors, because during COVID, they were key to getting it under control. And they worked so many hours, and a lot of people just didn't want to come back because of the overburden of workforce that they had to commit to in the hours, and the danger that they put themselves in for their families. So that was one key. The other piece I want to talk about this bill that was a misconception was, you brought up that the board members and who they are, right? Selecting the board members, of course, the hospital has the right to choose and pick who they put on those boards. And if you look at the list, they're very influential people in the community, right? Do they all have hospital backgrounds and do they understand budgets? They may understand budgets at a certain level, but not the hospital level, right?
Mhm.
I'm not minimizing who's on there, but the difference of what this board did is what we created is that we have 7 board members. They're appointed by the governor and they actually go through a process with the Senate to get confirmed. And those 7 people, we actually put criterias in the bill of what they need to have. So it's not we're just picking influential people or Democrats or Republicans. We have a pretty healthy list of what those qualifications are that the governor will choose that they have to fit it. It's in statute, so they can't veer from that. So those people are going to be that are on that board, the 7 people that will be appointed by the governor and then go through the Senate confirmation, which Republicans and Democrats both get to ask the questions about what those qualifications are and ensuring that they're qualified. So the ones that are going to oversee and get this budget are going to be well qualified individuals. And I just want to make sure that I put that out there because that was an important piece of this. Who are those people that are going to do it? In the original bill, we had that the governor appoints the Senate and the House. Look, as a speaker, I get to appoint a lot of boards and commissions, and it is by word of mouth who wants this. There's no qualifications or me deciding who goes on it. I do try to find that. So it's kind of open-ended, but this is more specific and it's in the legislation that they have to have meet certain criterias. So I just want to make sure that people understand how important that process is, even though it was like it was misconstrued during
Right.
that process. That was important for me to get out to you after looking at those board members. And they
Absolutely.
are going to be compensated. So it's not just people that are going to volunteer. You do have a certain level, who are volunteers on board members for nonprofits. I'm the executive director for the Powell of Delaware, which is a nonprofit 501c3. Our board members are all volunteers. They get elected on the board. They don't have any really criteria, but they're people in the community that actually want to give back to after school programs, right? So I think that's where, I just wanted to make that clarification for you. Where did you want me to go from there? Because I lost.
So, one other maybe specific example that I want our audience to know is I used to pay for my employees 12 years ago, $250 for their health insurance. And that time, as an employer, I was able to cover everything at 100%. Today, our rate, I'm not going to mention the insurance company name, but they can guess probably easily because there's not that many. We are paying $736 with $5,200 deductible. When we were paying $250, we didn't have deductibles. So $5,250 deductible and total is $736. We used to pay up to $425. This year we increased to $500 because there are people in this office who are single moms who are just started their career and they have a lot of expenses. They have student loans. They have other, expenses that we may not have later on, and they are struggling. And every little bit helps. And what we need to understand is who's responsible for these increases. And we expect, of course, our state officials to understand, what this issue is, where the problem is coming from. And the other key factor is Stephanie Hansen was with us 2 weeks ago, and the example that she shared, which I wasn't expecting her to do that, and this injection that she needs to get twice a year, it's 8,000 to 9,000 in Christiana Hospital. She named them, and in her primary care office is $1,200. Same thing, 1,200. 8,500, let's go with the average. So that's why our health insurance also is going up at this level, because the outpatient practices, ambulatory practices, we are not the one who's driving the cost. In fact, like I'm a healthcare provider from our Medicare share savings program. We are #1 for program year 2022 in Delaware and ranked 17 nationwide. based on our outcome. And we were better than the hospital systems, but I don't have the same budget with the hospital systems, but I have the same doctors, if not better. So that means in order to provide the good quality care doesn't mean that you have to charge 6 times more. And that's what people should all be knowledgeable of this. And also, one other really important thing which you mentioned, when you spend 46% of your budget on one ticket item, that's huge. That's why this is important for the state, right?
Well,
So,
and the 46% is kind of scary because you look at a lot of the higher education, our schools, our senior centers, our fire departments, as that increases, that means you have to take away from some of the key services in our state. So as that grows, that 46% grows, we have less money to put back out into the community. And, that's concerning. And what I can tell you is that I did take this on because I do know the difference. Like, I have constituents call me, they're like, hey, it's cost me X amount of dollars at Christiana Care. It's like half the cost if I go out of Christiana Care. And I'm like, yeah, so what's the difference of that? And when we went back to, in this our state benefits, we're like, tell us why it has increased that much. And like, oh, it's diet this year, Ozempic and the drugs that are going down. I'm like, well, what are the specifics on that? So like nobody's giving us the specifics on it. And how is that acceptable that they don't explain why that MRI is so much more expensive at Christiana Care than it is outside of Christiana Care?
that's
And I hate to keep using Christiana Care, but I'm in Newcastle, so I hear all the stories. I hear my constituents call me when they're hospitalized, when they go to the emergency room, waiting in the emergency room for hours and hours. And, and, you're talking about mental health patients and getting the care that they need right at that moment. So, I think it was at the right time at the right place. Like, this was enough. And that's where we have to wrap our arms around it. I do believe that there's three key issues that we have to address, and it's the hospitals, it is the pharmacy, and it's the insurance companies. So those are the three big drivers that you have for healthcare costs. And I can guarantee that next year we will be addressing it with insurance companies too. So there'll be lots more mountains to climb to get where we need to be. This is a piece of it, and hopefully it will change, and hopefully this process will be a little bit more transparent. You'll have the right people on that board. With the substitute bill, we actually did give them, if they keep within the benchmark, they don't have to go to this board. If they go above the benchmark, then they go to the board, and the board asks for an action. So they have like 3 years to get their costs under control. And, they will have the budget. There will be open forums that people can go in there and talk about it. So it's the transparency of it, raising the awareness in the community, letting our constituents in the state of Delaware knowing that we are paying attention to it and we are addressing it is really important, because day in and day out, you talk to the people too.
Now I have a new name for you. I don't know if you're going to like this or not.
Uh-oh.
Hopefully you'll like it. So you are the Iron Lady of healthcare now.
Oh, no. Actually, I have to say it was a team effort. Having, you and your group supporting us, because when you get beat up every day, but I could tell you Senator Townsend, and the governor, and, we stayed really tight on this, and we worked together, and, that shows a good team effort, that we all had the same direction, and, we got beat up pretty bad. So yeah, I'll take that Iron Lady.
Well, that's great. Now you are up for re-election, right?
I am.
So I know you have a little bit limited time, and then you have another obligation, and I don't want to take too much time. And I know you are going to be elected. You don't have to go through the primary.
I do have a primary.
Oh, who's primary? I didn't know that.
Yeah, I have a primary and that's September 10th is the date for the primary. The House of Representatives has to run every 2 years.
Mhm.
I think running every 2 years, and people complain, is it two, like Senate gets four, but I think it keeps you on your toes because it makes you stay involved in your community. And, I've been in my community for 20 years. I've done a lot in my district. I've done a lot of great legislation. I think that I've learned a lot rising from a representative of the minority caucus to the majority and then being whipped to majority leader to Speaker of the House. Kind of shows my dedication to the state and dedication to my constituents. So it's, democracy. Democracy is, you know me by now. I like my challenges. I don't mind climbing a hill or a mountain. And I have a lot of people supporting me and a lot of great, great constituents in my district.
I see. Well, you're going to be fine. I don't. I didn't even think that someone would primary you in this period because, I mean, I just called you the Iron Lady of Healthcare. So, but you are also. I know that you are one of the most important state officials in today's in today. So we want to make sure that. If there was anything that you would like to say for your reelection, for those people who are watching, any message that you want to give them?
I mean, the only message I have is I got into office because I had my own personal issue with my daughter who had alopecia when she was younger, and I became an advocate for her. And because she lost all of her hair, it was like 1% of the population going through that autoimmune disease, made me realize that I had a higher calling. That I know that when I called my state rep, they didn't return my phone call. And that was the reason why I jumped into politics, is because I felt like if I'm not being heard, then or other people not being heard. So, I look at myself as somebody who's always stayed grounded and know that if somebody calls me, it may not be my top priority, but it's their priority. And everybody's got something going on in their lives. And it's important to have somebody in a position like this to get things done and know how to navigate the system to get them the help, the resources that they need. So that's what I hang my hat on every day. I love the job in Dover, but I love the constituent work and I love helping people. So I sometimes I like knocking doors. Sometimes them being in Dover, it's a little bit easier to talk to people than to try to navigate all these like moving balls. But I love what I do, and I hope that I can continue doing that in November.
So you'll be just fine, and I don't think there will be any difficulties. I have one last question, so then we keep our promise that you are on time. I saw you last time on last Tuesday actually, at the event with for Bethany Long. And I, of course, as you know, I support her. I help her with her campaign as much as I can, and I know she's a really a solid, well qualified, well experienced person who's going to be representing this state as a governor. But you also publicly endorsed her, if I'm not mistaken. I don't want to misspeak, but you were in the panel, right?
Yes, I absolutely endorse Bethany How Long. I've known her for 20
So,
years. I sat with her in the House of Representatives. She was a senator in my district, and I've seen her. I don't think anybody works harder than her. She is, we call her the Energizer Bunny, where you just wind her up and she keeps going and going and going. But you want to talk about healthcare, it's one of the number one issues in the economy. You can't find a more qualified person to run for public office and somebody that is hands on the ground during COVID. She was out all day long helping with, vaccinate people, with mental health and drug abuse. She's the person that is there. And, the one thing I say about Bethany is that everybody has her phone number, everybody. And
right.
when you call Bethany, she picks up and she gets things done. And I think she knows how to navigate the system in legislative hall. She knows policy. She knows how to get it done. She understands our budget. She understands what's going out in Delaware. And not only that, she has a great character, wonderful character, good person.
Well, thank you so much. Anything you would like to add before we close? I know, time is limited, so I don't want to take too much time from you.
So what I would like to put out there is that next year I would really like to work on workforce. in the healthcare industry, for doctors and nurses, and to get, to figure out, I know that we have a shortage and we need to get more people in the state of Delaware and make Delaware more attractive. So I would call upon you to be one of my stakeholders that I have conversations on how we do that. So if you could put that in the back of your mind, come November, hopefully we can have a conversation to see what we could do to draw more doctors into Delaware, more nurses, and what we need to do to kind of make that a top priority in January.
Absolutely. I'll do whatever I can from my side. And I do take that very seriously, because I know that input from real businesses, real people, people who are actually out there doing things is important. And healthcare is very important. It's like it's one of the most important one, and the shortage is real. Many people don't understand. Things are going to get just worse if you don't do anything. But I believe with the approach that we have in the state of Delaware, under the Carney administration, and now with the new leadership, I believe we are going to be doing fine, and I will be there to support everything that you guys do. Thank you so much, Speaker Longhurst. It was a great pleasure to have you.
Thank you for having me, and everybody have a wonderful weekend.
All right, you too. Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right, Mr. Donovan, you would like to join? And I know today is a little bit different. So many people out there may not know that, or may, because we post everything. We are moving, today is our last day in this office. And last day in this studio. So in the new office, we do actually have a studio. Many people don't know that this is our conference. This is my conference room, next to, attached to my office. But in the new office, there's a designated studio. It's going to be called, and Susan Anderson, who supports everything that I do, and she's probably one of the biggest supporter of my business, our businesses, and she's a great partner who understands what we are trying to do. I'm sure she's packing somewhere now in the office. She's a great leader for our people and for our company. And I do want to acknowledge everything that she's doing with her team. And also today she's off, but Ann Wilson is also doing way more than what she should be doing. And I appreciate everything that she's doing. The reality is we are moving. So next week we'll be working like a little bit remotely, and then we'll do the first one probably if the studio is ready next Friday, based on the travel situation. But going back to Valerie Longhurst, and I know you are in the room, you are listening. This bill is now effective as of, it was signed yesterday. So that's a huge success, number one. What was your take on her?
I think the timing was very fortunate, actually. So I know we tried getting her a little bit earlier in the springtime, but having this be the day after, it's, I think, a relief on her end, but also our end, that we know there's a little bit of like closure, that it was a success. We know that a lot of her time obviously was obligated and dedicated to that, so understandable she wasn't as free earlier on, but I think obviously it is a big milestone, and I'm curious to see what the response is from some of these hospitals now that this is signed and in effect.
So they're not probably happy.
Not.
So it will, I mean, we'll see in time, but you know, that's kind of interesting, and I want to kind of just a little bit talk about this. And then this may be an example for those young people who are watching us as well. And we have a lot of young employees too. So not every time we are able to put these messages out there. I do it on one-on-one meetings, but not in this setting. But one of the things that if well, there's no luck, number one. The luck is something that if you try certain things and you put the effort out there, then when the luck actually comes at some point, you have to be there when it comes. So you can assume that the luck is going to go all the way out of its way and then come to you while you're sitting at home. So what you were explaining is we wanted Valerie Longhurst earlier because we wanted to talk about the bill, and maybe it was going to be a little bit easier for us to hear it from her. However, she was busy. We in fact scheduled once or twice, and it had to be rescheduled. And there was a time where like, oh, well, we really need to schedule this when maybe not. Like, when can we do it?
Yeah.
But then we never stopped trying. So then when we scheduled this 2 weeks ago, we didn't know the bill was going to sign yesterday,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah.
So that timing, that fortunate timing is, yes, fortunate, but if we didn't do all those things and then put all the effort out there, it wouldn't have happened.
Right.
So, so we were lucky, hey, but we really created our luck in a different way.
Being prepared for it, yeah.
Right,
So when the
right.
preparedness meets that opportunity, that's when it all
Right.
falls into place. Yeah, I would agree.
But I think she's doing great, and I think she's probably at her peak now, where I see her doing other things in the future in the state of Delaware. And many people would remember we discussed the Congress race, and we did say that Eugene Young was going to drop. People can go back and watch the one from 4 weeks ago, I believe. Eugene, great guy, and I hope he's watching it. He was with us last summer. It's kind of like I feel bad because I want to see him successful. Really great person, but I think he's going to need a little bit more time. His name's out there; everyone knows him. But he did drop this week, and now our Sarah McBride is the only person, so she's not being challenged. So she's not going to go to the primary anymore. So we'll have the first transgender congresswoman not in Delaware, right? In United States.
Yeah.
So it's a historical moment. It will be a historical moment, but we all know, we all said this, Sarah is not running her campaign based on her gender. She's a very well-established person, and it's a lot of experience in politics, and she's going to be a great congresswoman, and hopefully things are going to be okay for her. And we have the governor race is a little bit more tight, stressful. There's a lot of tension, but we'll see. Just yesterday from the educational, I want to make sure that I say this right. 1 second. We just got an endorsement, as I said, it's Bethany Long, by the State Education Association, Delaware State Education Association, which is a really important step in her campaign. And again, this is going to be about experience, a well-qualified person with not so much experience and not yet qualified person, but still how much money is being raised is important. Support is important. We want to make sure that people are out there and supporting Bethany, and that's about it.
Yeah, so a lot to keep up to date with. Obviously, we'll be following along closely as we have been. Looking forward to it.
And next week we are going to probably do a little bit earlier because I have a flight from New York.
You'll be away.
Yeah. So, and then I think RCM is going to join us. Alp Sentai is going to be with us for RCM discussion, and we are going to talk about fee-for-service structure and how it's interfering with value-based and what things people, insurance companies and medical practices need to know. And then we are going to do that with Alp next week. And then we'll have our Bariatric Friday. We are going to discuss.
So we might have either a premiere set up or after that. Sorry, that's the following week. Yeah, so we're doing the social stigma. So next week is social stigma with morbid obesity in the community. The following week, hopefully, we'll have a premiere scheduled.
But so stigma, we have a specific topic with
the Miss Alabama.
So we have a new Miss Alabama at 400 pounds. And from the weight management and from the wellness standpoint, as a healthcare provider, we have responsibilities, and we know that there are there are certain things needs to happen. Everyone has certain issues they deal with, they have to go through in life, but our problem is when unhealthiness is being promoted and making it okay, and then becoming a role model for young people. That's a concern. That's what we are going to discuss with Dr. Erdogan. And so many other things coming up.
Yeah, so I'm gonna say before we get to 2 and 3 weeks into the future, we still have 2 more sessions for today. So we still have our diabetes wellness webinar. That's going to be at our 2 p.m. session today. Dr. Handal and Caroline going over, I believe it is the advancements, and also the nutrition aspect. And then at 3 o'clock is our Bariatric Friday with Dr. Wing going over the support group aspect. Yep, so still 2 more sessions today.
Okay, so well, thank you for being with us, and hopefully HB 350 discussion was able to address some of the questions as Speaker Valerie Longhurst was with us, and we'll be back, well, in 15 minutes for our diabetes event and next week for this event. All right, thank you. Bye-bye.